Welcome to Big Closet Small Planet, made possible by the CNA Foundation, the H&M Foundation, the Relander Foundation, and Tencel, in partnership with Eco Textile News and Planet Textiles. I'm Mike Schrager. So if you've been listening to the series so far, you may have picked up on a particular theme. The theme is, with all these wonderful, inspiring ideas, these innovations that hold the promise to transform the industry, there are a lot of tripwires and minefields to get us to success. And often we don't hear about the real challenges in the supply chain of taking an idea that seems wonderful and sexy and putting it into practice in a practical way at the scale that we require. So luckily today, here at Planet Textiles, we get the chance to talk to two individuals who are working on this problem day to day. Both are trying to find ways of financing and implementing effective technologies and innovations that can have a benefit for people, planet, and profit. So I would like them to introduce themselves. We can begin with Abhishek.
Yeah. Hello listeners, I'm glad to be here. I'm Abhishek Bansal. I lead the sustainability and innovation efforts for Arvind. Arvind is the largest textile manufacturer in India, and we are fully vertical from starting from spinning the fibers and right up to finished garments. And our garments are supplied world over to around 24 leading brands and retailers in different markets.
And where in India are you based?
So I'm based in Ahmedabad. We have 14 facilities all over in different parts of India, and we have 3 facilities in Ethiopia, which we started around a couple of years back.
And just for those who are a little bit new to the field, a vertical actor such as yourself, that means that you're including all the steps from fiber to garment manufacturing, right? Whereas there are plenty of factories or actors who only do a piece of that puzzle.
Yes, exactly. So there are factories which are just doing spinning, so they convert fiber to yarn. There are factories which are called dye houses, which are dyeing either yarn or fabrics. And then there are factories independently who do cut and sew or who do laundry, which is washing of garments. There are also factories which do printing on a standalone basis. So we have combined all of those, and of course there are different facilities within our business which do these activities, but to a large extent we can do right from fiber spinning to finished garment across.
And I just wanted to ask you a question about India. How important is the textile sector to the country of India?
Oh, extremely important for economic growth as well as for self-sustainability in textile usage. So India as such is a large market itself for textile consumption, but textile has been an important part of our economic growth over the years. Until about IT revolution began, textile used to be the largest export income earner for India. Now, of course, IT is there and we competed for a few years and then gave up. But definitely it still is very important from economic growth as well as employment generation. So textile is the largest employer of people in India still.
Okay.
After agriculture, of course.
Tanvi, tell us about yourself.
Hi, so very happy to be here as well. I'm an investment manager for the Good Fashion Fund. We're based in Amsterdam, an initiative between Found, which is an impact fund manager, and Fashion for Good, which, well, I'm not sure. If you're in the sustainable textile industry, I think you've heard about Fashion for Good. They're doing some incredible work. The fund, it's a simple concept. We provide long-term USD loans to textile manufacturers that want to implement disruptive or sustainable technologies in their production process. And we target India, Vietnam, and Bangladesh. So I manage the investments of the fund. We have a fund director, and so there's 5 of us in total.
Okay, we're looking forward to hearing about that. So Tanvi, let me just ask you before we get into the discussion about the challenges of implementing things. Is what you're doing with the fund, why did this come about? Why is it needed?
Absolutely. I mean, I think today John, who's the head of water at Nike, made a very good point here. Oh, we're at a conference. This is where I'm not sure if listeners know that. So
we are at the Planet Textiles conference. So you're referring to John, who just spoke in the plenary.
Yes, and he made a very strong statement where he said there is no dearth of technology out there to change the industry. There is a distinct lack of capability, and I think the lack of capability, I completely agree with him, stems from a lack of knowledge of the technology that's out there, but then also just a lack of funding. I mean, commercial banks hesitate to take this technology risk mainly because it's very niche production technology and they don't understand it. So they don't want to take technology risk. Secondly, local commercial banks also cannot provide USD financing, whereas a lot of the manufacturers, I mean, the majority of their revenues are in dollars because they're export-based companies. So these two issues is what basically is the genesis of the Good Fashion Fund, is that we are able to take the technology risk and we're able to provide long-term USD-based financing to manufacturers. So I think there's a high need for it in order to raise this industry to where it needs to be in order to be sustainable. And I mean, we're an absolute drop in the ocean of funding that is required to get us there. So
right, so we'll get to that. Yeah. Are you unique, your fund? Is there anything else like it for the textile industry?
There is, to my knowledge, nothing else out there that focuses only on this issue and in the textile industry. There have been initiatives in the past that did more equity financing but they were more growth capital based financing. We are more unique. I don't want to say one of the kind, but to my knowledge that is the case. Mainly because we're a debt fund and we're focusing on capital expenditures for sustainability and nothing else.
So you're requiring performance,
absolutely,
environmental performance, social performance,
absolutely,
in order to measure success.
Yes.
And why is it that you're able to do this, but banks aren't? I mean, this is maybe some basic 101 for our listeners, but
no, it's a great.
It's a high risk thing for you too, as well.
It's a high risk initiative. The reason we're able to do this is twofold. One, the Good Fashion Fund is a blended finance fund. So we've got our anchor investors that are willing to take a first loss risk in order to catalyze more capital from commercial players. So the idea is, and we're still fundraising, by the way, so we're not there yet.
If you have money.
Exactly, yeah, if anyone has money. No, so the target of the fund is $60 million, 60. The idea is that we will have a junior equity tranche, which is at least 50% of the fund, and that acts as a first loss tranche. And these are players in the industry or strategic investors that are committed to sustainability. And then the rest of the funding comes from commercial investors that get their commercial return. And also their investment is protected by the junior equity tranche. So we're able to do this mainly because we're a blended finance initiative. Commercial banks aren't able to do it. Their cost of funding is higher than ours. Secondly, we're able to do this because we've got investors willing to invest in the junior equity tranche. So we've got strategic investors such as the CNA Foundation that are willing to support this initiative. So I think without them, this would just not be possible.
So you mentioned or implying a couple things that are essential for making technologies successful in the implementation phase. But I want you to list them. So you've mentioned obviously this issue of financing and risk. But what are the real world challenges that you experience in doing this to try to get new cutting edge technologies adopted. I'm assuming that sort of things that aren't cutting edge, that are proven, are much easier to deal with. So tell us some of the things.
Sure. So primarily, I'll just go back a little bit in time. So if you see traditionally how textile have been manufactured, they have not drastically evolved over last 15, 20 or even more years. And all the improvement in the industrial machines have been incremental. So they'll be like 5% doing things few percentage points better, but the production and machines and everything would look exactly same. So the entire talent that we have, not only as a company but as an industry, is very well conversant with the existing technology suppliers, machines, the way they work, the dyeing, the way it works, and each and every machinery. Now the challenge that we have at hand cannot be solved with the incremental technology. So we are looking more at radical transformation of the industry, and it involves going to a completely new technologies or new set of machine or the new way of production. So if we are dyeing with water, we are thinking of for future dyeing without water. So that's a radical kind of change that we are looking at. If we had a machine which is like 200 meters in length, now we are squeezing it to 50 meters or less.
That's good, right?
Yeah, so that's all good, but there's no there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of lack of technical capability in the industry to adapt to those. And second big point is that earlier how the new technology adoption will happen, it will be mostly with these 10-15 large textile machinery manufacturers, and even more that you see here at ITMA. We are also at the world's largest textile machinery event this week, and so they are all with very good engineering teams of their own. They have huge capital to invest in the new machines. So whenever we have adopted a new technology, there's a good amount of handover period. So these folks from existing machine players would come in, stay with us for 6 months, do all the installation, handover and stuff. Well, the technologies we are looking at right now for transformation, they are like small startups. So there is, of course, support from Fashion for Good and funds, but they're still very small teams and with smaller resources to be able to do that. So there's a lot of work that manufacturing industry has to take on their shoulders to be able to do that. So definitely this is one. Second, of course, is capital. So risk of the capital involved. So I won't say it is risk of or there's totally lack of access of capital. There is capital available, and especially for medium to large manufacturers, this capital borrowing happens against the balance sheet. So not so much on the technology directly, but there's a lack of risk capital. So there's lack of people who are willing to take risk on the technology and share the rewards in case there are rewards. So we're looking at more of that kind of mechanisms, because earlier some of that risk was absorbed by the technology providers. So technology providers would give multiple year guarantees that their machines will operate in a certain manner. If it doesn't operate, there were sort of defined outcomes. So we are looking at altogether different animal right now in terms of technology. So there's both financing risk as well as the capability risk. One thing which is good is that there's no lack of demand. So we see a lot of demand for these technologies from our customers.
So let me stop you there. When you say demand, is it demand that you use particular technologies or demand that you show better sustainability performance?
So it's mainly for performance. So there's a lot of demand from the customers, from the brands that we supply to, and even I assume their end consumers. And in some cases it could be pressure also in addition to the demand to reduce the resource usage drastically while making textiles. So that is something which is kind of driving also a keen interest from the manufacturing side, and provided we have it's like we have to meet all in the middle somewhere.
So if you were to guess, what % of your clients, your current clients or your potential clients, are asking for better environmental performance?
Yes, so largely in case of us, we supply to 3 large markets, EU, US or North America and Japan. So I think the interest from EU came first, so it was already like 5, 6, or even more number of years back when people started to actually go and look at textile mills and that how production is done, what are the impacts. Earlier, the discussion used to more stop at the garment factories and on things like design and price and other parameters. So, but the way it is catching up is quite amazing in terms of speed. So we have a lot of interest now from North America, from Japanese customers on how we are taking care of these impacts and what is our plan to reduce these. And I would say if there's a push from about 50 to 60% of the people that we work with, but other 40-50% are also interested if we go and tell them that this is something which is possible. So there's a larger interest at play.
And I have heard, and we're going to go over to Tanvi to hear her views of the similar situation, but this is not necessarily a business opportunity for you as I see it. This is more to stay in the game or to be competitive, right? That it feels like a lot of this is just costs on your side. And you're shaking your head. I don't know if that's an agreement or just that you've heard my question. But is this just Tanvi, is this just a cost for these kind of actors to stay in the game, to invest in these things, or are there business benefits beyond just being considered as a continued supplier?
No, I think it's a combination of both, but we're moving towards the latter, which is that it's a business benefit. I think if a factory is inefficiently run, the cost is going to be very high anyway. So there are cost benefits to being more efficient and saving more resources, and despite, of course, the higher capital expenditure that someone like Arvind would have to make at the moment. But it is also, of course, becoming a business conversation, and this is where we struggle a little bit, and that's why I don't want to give a black and white response here. It is because we do know that even though manufacturers are willing to make their production process more sustainable, brands are hesitant to take on those additional costs. So and that is a conversation I think Fashion for Good is really championing there with the brands, because manufacturers have very thin margins as it is. I mean, this is not an industry with extremely high profitability margins. So if they cannot pass on these capital expenditure costs to brands, and in fact it's the opposite. There's actually there's a margin squeeze because wages are increasing. Their manufacturer costs are increasing every year, and brands are hesitant to take these costs on. So the prices they pay for garments are largely the same, right? Or maybe a bit more. So I think this is a conversation and that is why it will eventually become a business case, because eventually brands will also be able to pass on these costs to consumers, right? Because as consumers, so it's all interrelated, right? It's a whole ecosystem. But at the moment, I think it's largely a cost benefit. If you look at the lifetime value of production, hopefully, or it will become a benefit very soon, or sooner than it has been. Like Abhishek said, it cannot be incremental anymore. What we need is exponential change.
Right, and I see a potential catch-22, as we say, which is you want to be able to pass on the cost to consumers or to somebody, but I don't see that happening with the business models that exist today, which are low cost per product models. Yeah. Do you see any of that shifting? I mean,
I strongly believe that what we have done over the years in the industry, that we have subsidized consumer at the cost of environment. Yeah. So if you see a right price of producing a good, it would be way higher than even the selling price of the good that is being sold in some of the discount stores. But we have sort of spoiled the consumer and made them believe that this is the price or this is the right price. But it doesn't mean it cannot be undone. So it has to be a long walk back to the same level. But if you see the retail prices as well as our selling prices of the goods are much lower than what we used to sell at 20 years back. So, and all other industries have gone up in terms of the retail prices or the manufacturing prices. So this is a reverse squeeze. And in terms of what Tanvi just mentioned and also your question, I would just like to say two things. One is that there is a lot of actually pressure on manufacturers within their own countries in terms of the resource access that we have. And we all realize that we are not going to have the access to these resources for a foreseeable future if we don't reduce our resource consumption or bring more efficiencies. So I think that is somewhere going to drive higher amount of change at a given point. And I think every production region has a different timeline when they run out of resources. But most of the production, if you see, they happen in water scarce region of the world. So all the water stressed regions are in fact having most of the textile production. So how long it can continue? So those are few things which can turn the situation within a matter of 1 or 2 years also.
Right. So let me ask you about technologies in particular. There are a lot of ideas through the platforms like Fashion for Good or others. Very exciting, very sexy, interesting. How many of them today do you think are implementable in the next 1 to 3 years? And how many are sort of long-term, I don't know what you would call them, sort of ideas that are interesting to play around with, but need to be handled as such? What do you both think? Tanvi, given as a financier, as a financier.
Yes, a financier, but not a technology expert, unfortunately. The way we have designed the fund is that luckily there's people a lot more kind of intelligent than us that have done this research, and the pulse of the fashion industry comes up with a score every year, and it tells you exactly what you need to get to the highest phase of sustainability for this industry, right? And at the moment we're doing very badly as an industry. We're in, I think, phase 2, if I'm not mistaken. We just entered phase 2 and the score is 42 for this year. We need to go to 80 for this industry to be sustainable. And they've already defined 8 pillars of what we need to get there. I mean, one is circular production methods, industrial revolution, traceability. What we do is very simple. We think that the technology exists for our mandate, which is at least 50% resource savings in either energy, water, or chemical use. It's very simple. We've kept it, because this industry is so complex that it's difficult to. And we believe the technology exists. So what we look at is these 8 pillars of the pulse of the fashion industry. And then we choose scalable and viable technologies that exist at the moment, that are best in class, that also enable at least 50% resource savings in one of these 3 criteria, so energy, water, or chemicals. And we have our feasibility studies. Fashion for Good also helps us there. And if we have a go-ahead in terms of the viability of the technology, but also the scalability, and a resource saving of 50%, we go ahead.
So how many of these are scalable? You say, based on what you said, you think there's enough out there that are scalable. Do you agree, Abhishek, that there's enough new technologies or innovations that are scalable today that get you to 50% reduction?
So I would not agree that there's already enough today, but there's a huge amount of work which is going on. And in terms of scalability also, I think time scale that you mentioned is challenging. So we would see very few, maybe 10% getting to scale within 1 to 3 years. It will take longer for the technology to get established. And then you have licenses of these technology you install and they become commercially viable and so on. Because right now most of these are either in lab or in pilot scale. So these are 2 large classifications where people are proving in labs that technology works, and in pilots then you determine a lot of other factors on how the quality of production, cost, and resource consumption. So to bring from there to a manufacturing requires a lot of things, and not only finance. It requires also many adaptations from brand side, because in many cases either the product will not be exactly say similar. There may be changes that that the designer need to adopt in their product, or you're making the products out of completely new fabric. So imagine instead of cotton you're wearing something else. So there's a consumer
algae
exactly.
Right.
So there's a whole consumer education aspect also, because if somebody loves cotton, they would continue to do so. So there are different steps that we need to walk all along.
And for Arvind, if you'd say your own experience, Tanvi's talking about sort of interventions that can reduce impacts by 50% in one of those areas. What was the time frame on that? Is that in the next 10 years, or when do you want them to be able to achieve that?
So basically the tenor of our loan, which is between 5 to 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
Our strategy is very specific to our fund, but I think the strategy itself is replicable, which is good.
5 to 7 year impact goals,
50%.
50%, which is significant. So do you think you can do that in those areas of water, energy, or chemicals?
Yes, so I think there are two themes here. One is which is textile specific machinery, and other is cross-cutting technologies. By cross-cutting, I would say that water recycling, so which is there for any other sector, renewable energy, or efficient boiler, or alternate fuel. So when I see those cross-cutting technologies, there's already enough out there commercially available which enables you to recycle water. So for example, right now we're able to recycle 70% of our water, and we have a goal for 100% by 2020. So, and many others are also doing so in terms of renewable energy and alternate fuel usage. So that, because there's a larger ecosystem including governments, technology suppliers across different industries, so that would itself help us as an industry to reduce if we adopt those technologies which are out there. Second is textile production specific technologies. So there are examples and where adoption is already happening. So for example, we recently adopted indigo foam dyeing, and we have a commercial scale machine now, but it is not very widespread to all the production systems. So that's just one which we have, and of course they would also look at it technology by technology. So there are examples where technologies is able to reduce 50% resource consumption on certain production types, but there's a larger universe out there.
Yeah. And I have to say, for someone like Arvind, it might be easier just because they don't lack the knowledge or to a certain extent the finance required. But as you go to smaller manufacturers, especially the ones below, let's say, 100 million in revenues, there are huge roadblocks, especially because the really disruptive technology, like Abhishek said, is not textile technology. It's technology that's from other industries that's being used in this industry to create exponential change. And there is just a complete lack of knowledge there. And also, these manufacturers are not able to take this technology risk. If it doesn't work, if they own, let's say, 1 or 2 production facilities as opposed to the 14 that Arvind owns, half their business stops if a technology doesn't work. So it's not something that they are able to do, which is a huge roadblock.
So what do we do to scale this up? So if we take your specific case, Arvind, and we take your specific fund or model, what can we learn from this? Because, one of the struggles we have is, even if individual organizations or companies do really well, if the industry as a whole doesn't do well, it doesn't make much of a difference, yeah. I would argue, right? That's relevant, with certain issues more than others, but how do we take what your learnings are and say, we need to apply this quickly across the whole industry? What would you say there?
I think it's a combination again, and I would say 2 things are critical besides other that we already discussed. One is regulation. So the regulations needs to get stronger in the production regions, and we should not look at moving production to a region where there's no regulation, because that's what has happened in the past, where if a regulation becomes stringent or wages increase, you find a new country where there's no regulation on
Is
resources.
India willing to regulate?
Yep, very much, and that's why I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of pressure that's there on the industry from within their own countries. So, the problem there is that at drop of the hat, production can move from one, not only from one manufacturer to other, but from one country to another and one continent to other. So that's what we've seen in the past. So it would nullify some of those aspects. And as we are hearing that production is moving out of certain countries because of difficult environmental regulations. So that's a clear example. And then second, apart from regulatory, is also there should be willingness to take on the increased costs, both from the manufacturer as well as to the brands, because with the existing margins, it's not possible to fund a risky new technology, and sometimes there are costs of production also increasing despite resource saving. So that may sound sort of bit unconvincing, but it's really the case, because especially when we look at green chemistry, where you would use less of those chemicals, but they are very expensive to manufacture as such. So there is a definite need to look beyond bottom of the pyramid costing, where you almost come to auction and make textile a commodity. So you need to look at I think industry is also ready to do it transparently. So transparently, we welcome customers to assess what would be the cost of producing with these technologies, and if they're willing to take on some cost. And we are having these discussions thanks to the interest in sustainability.
Although it sounds like a real paradigm shift that brands today would have to rethink
Definitely
a substantial part of their business model.
Yeah.
Right? If they're going to charge more, they have to figure out how to make that work, and they're optimized today not to do that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And just just to answer your question on how do we solve this as quickly as possible given the constraints, and I think there's two ways to do it. One, I think the larger manufacturers need to take more risks. They need to be the ones doing the really disruptive stuff, the supporting startups that have technology that's scalable and possibly even commercially viable in a few years, but they're startups and they don't have the resources to grow. And I think Arvind especially is doing quite a bit of that, like the indigo foam dyeing and but also for smaller manufacturers, that's where really the capital and knowledge building comes in. So larger brands, larger manufacturers, I think, need to take more risks, really need to adopt the disruptive technologies, operational pilots, anything that needs to happen. The smaller ones, there's just a need for, better funding or access to funding and knowledge in order to at least install the best-in-class existing technology. For instance, water, if you have an RO, reverse osmosis bio-ETP, you're saving, or you can use up to 75% of your water.
So you know what she means by reverse osmosis APT?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I don't.
So it's basically a water recycling
It's a water
technology.
purifier,
I know.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what I mean is that if the larger manufacturers take the risks, that will make it more market standard. That will give a proof of concept, and
Right.
then the smaller manufacturers that have the commitment to sustainability can.
But we're
go
asking
there.
them, and I understand, it makes sense, but we're asking them to move out of their comfort zone, to take
Absolutely.
risks. We're not necessarily reducing a risk for them there.
Well, we are, as
You
the
are,
Good Fashion
yeah.
Fund, because we provide risk-tolerant capital.
So let me ask you, could you take your model and scale it? Because you have a bunch of risk-tolerant organizations who are willing to take that first loss.
Yeah.
How do we get more of those risk-tolerant
Absolutely.
organizations? Who are they?
No, absolutely. I mean, this is such a great, and as we're fundraising at the moment, we have these conversations constantly as a team when we're brainstorming. I think the problem with the textile industry is it's still seen as a niche. But the problems we're solving, the problems we're solving with our fund, they're universal. There's energy savings, there's water savings, there's social issues.
So the model is
the
duplicatable. The impact.
Absolutely. The sustainable development goals that we contribute to are universal and multiple. The problem is that we are seen as a textile fund. And that is why, that is why...
So you need to reframe.
We need to actually become an impact fund in the textile industry.
That's right, you're using the textile industry to leverage.
And we use the textile industry because it's one of the biggest polluters in the world.
That's right.
But I think that is something that, it's also a learning process for us because this is a first-time fund. It's
Well, there was also something we discussed, and again, this is not a unique, a nuanced description of a financial instrument, but there are other funds where you've bundled high risk with medium and lower risk in order to spread the risk.
Absolutely.
And we've talked about that for 2 years now. How do we get those funds? Because once you can reduce the risk for those investors where they know they're going to get other things on the upside, they will come in. And as you said, once you have a foundational group of investors, it seems to me there's tons of people who want to come in.
Absolutely.
So couldn't we be creating these joint funds among different actors at a larger scale where we're punching in all these high risk lab-based prototypes? They get some seed funding, maybe a few of them succeed. Absolutely. But we also have these more mainstream, less risky that give you your return.
I mean, I'll give you a very recent example.
Was that an intelligent comment that I just made, by the way?
No, it was spot on.
Sometimes I'm never sure.
No, I mean, I'll give you a very recent example, right? The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands has just released a 160 million euro financing facility. Now, this facility was won by the FMO, which is the Dutch Development Bank, the WWF and SNV, and a climate fund manager. So a consortium of 4 players. And what this facility does is provides first loss financing or risk capital to initiatives that help with water, energy, or the GHG reduction and things like that. This is a prime example of what can happen when different players come together with different agendas. For instance, the climate fund is going to focus on a water facility, FMO is going to focus on energy, but they've come together as a consortium to make use of this fund and diversify the funding to multiple players, right? If we can get to a stage in the textile industry where we can access such funds, not because we're a textile fund, but because we're a fund that's, also in the same area, right? We've got water savings, we've got energy savings, we've got social issues. But because we're seen as a textile fund, we can often not access those.
I get your point is very well taken.
That finance.
And then once you frame it in terms of SDGs or other public benefits, you can maybe access development aid fund.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I know that there's a lot of talk
about. And also partner
with
such entities who, at the end of the day, are affecting the same SDGs, but just in different industries.
Right.
So I think that's what needs to happen, and it needs to happen very quickly.
Yes.
Because I think we're already a bit late, so it needs to happen.
So if you were to pick one thing, and you may have already said it, but if there's one thing you think, if I had a blank check or if I had a magic wand, to choose one thing that would really accelerate change, either the uptake of new technologies or the transformation that's needed, what would you choose?
I would probably speak as a manufacturer here and out of own selfish interest. I think if there's any technology guarantee instrument that enables to offset any risk, that would be key for us. So our new technology uptake would increase maybe several times.
So a technology guarantee, what do you mean by that?
Any fund or any support available, which in case a technology fails or does not do what it promises to do, can protect a manufacturer's interest.
Right.
That would see a lot of...
so some sort of insurance underwriting.
Yes.
Right, that would be interesting.
Well, we've got a product for that. we already, we've
Ladies
already
and gentlemen,
created
the product. Yeah.
So we call it an impact loan, and basically what we do is we share the technology risk by charging a very low interest rate, extremely nominal, and then getting part of the resource savings. So for instance, if the baseline was 100, exactly.
Wow.
And that is why if the technology fails, we take the hit because we basically get close to 0% interest.
Right, you get your investment back.
We get our principal back,
but
we make absolutely no money. And as you know, the same amount of money 5 years from now, we've actually lost money because of the time value of money.
Sure.
Yeah.
But could brands do that? Some brands are so large that they have capital that they could, because we've always talked about how do you share, if you're going to demand something of a supplier, you should share in the benefits and share in the risks, right? And you're doing this as an external fund, but could brands say, listen, we'll loan you some capital, we go in this together as a joint venture and we'll share the risk? Is that something you've ever considered with your?
Yeah, there's more and more interest to do that. We recently did one partnership with Gap where we both invested in a water treatment facility. So it's not a textile production technology, but it makes that facility entirely on renewable recycled water instead of fresh water. But I would say there's more and more need to do that, and even in some cases we have struggled to get product commitment. So we say that we'll go out there and invest in this, but can you just commit to offtake all the production that happens from there? So which will also be a
So you need
guarantee.
still them to commit longer term to buying this amount.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's still not part of the culture and business model today.
Yeah.
You didn't get to answer, I think, specifically. Is there one thing you wanted to?
One thing that I do exponentially, to be honest, I think it all comes down to consumption. So yes, financing is a problem. Yes, knowledge is a problem. But to be honest, consumption is a problem, and it's unsustainable. And fast fashion needs to end, whether it's through regulation, whether it's through awareness amongst consumers, whether it's just something as simple as telling teenage girls that buying a t-shirt from one of these, I don't want to take names, but fast fashion brands is not going to make you happy or more content. But for me, at least in the developed world, consumption is an issue, and we cannot just expect technology or financing to give us a free pass in this. We need to understand that we cannot consume the way we do. But that's a broader, maybe a more philosophical answer. So what needs to happen? Yes,
I mean, I was very happy with that answer. So you don't have to go any further than that.
Right? Okay.
Right. So you're looking at the even more fundamental systemic problems. If we don't find a way of steering our consumption so it's reduced. We can't just change how we consume. We need to reduce.
And to be honest, technology is never going to be enough. We've had this whole, utopian idea that technology is going to help us exponentially consume always or increase our consumption. And just because technology is just going to reap the resources more efficiently, that has never happened, and it's not going to happen in the next 30 years. So then the other side of the spectrum is let's reduce our consumption or let's consume more efficiently or sustainably.
Yeah, okay. Is there anything you haven't said that you're burning to say, something that you think is important to get out there in order to advance the discussion that we're talking about?
Definitely. There's one thing which we have not touched upon much is also consumer education on what they are buying and how it is made, because if they know how it is made, they'll be more aware about asking these questions or demanding more sustainable product. So although we see there is enough demand from brands to manufacturers, but I don't particularly see there's a lot of demand from their customers to brands.
Right. And I would say that I agree with you in principle. I just think the time it takes to educate the consumer is too long. That's my view. Like if we spent all our time there, we'll never get there. So I think you're right, and it will be interesting to see platforms like Good On You and things if they can get traction and consumer awareness can lead to quicker changes. So thanks for that, but I would debate you that that's really going to get us there in 10 years. That feels to me like a 40-year project or something. What about yourself? Anything that you haven't lifted up about?
Well, maybe just a little bit of, again, a bit of marketing, no? This is a podcast. Yeah, we're the Good Fashion Fund. We're fundraising. So if the
And what kind of
idea
actors are you
sounds,
looking to
interesting.
include? Are there particular types of
We're looking
organizations?
for brands, we're looking for foundations, we're looking for government bodies, multilateral financial institutions.
And how much do you want to raise?
We want to raise 60 million.
60 million US dollars.
US dollars.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've got some funding from anchor investors, but we're not there yet.
And I make a plea. I don't know if it's too early to make this plea, but we need to take that fund concept and multiply it by
absolutely
good knows how much, right?
Yeah.
So this is a great start to figure out how to structure these.
Absolutely.
But we need
and
to
how
think
to market it as a
exponentially.
fund.
Yeah.
And I think the key is to not market it as a textile fund, but as an impact fund in the textile industry.
That's right. Very, very important.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you both for taking the time. Really appreciate it. I hope we can talk again because these issues are nuanced and there's a lot more in this to discuss. But thank you.
Thanks so
Thank you very much.